Hello, welcome back to Falcon Blues TV, you filthy animals. And today we're very happy to have a friend of the channel back on, Richard Buxton. Richard, how are we, mate?
Yeah, very good, mate. Yourself?
All good, yeah. Yeah, not too bad. And today we are here to talk about your new book, The Worst Run Club in the Country. I do love the title. It's Everton's Downfall under Farhad Moshiri, but I do have to ask straight away that it's a great title. Did, was it Jamie Carragher who mentioned something similar to that? Was it originally?
Yeah, it was exactly Jamie Carragher's words on Monday Night Football. It was when Frank Lampard got sacked and Everton at the time made a mess of it. You know, we dragged the sacking out for about 5 hours. Everyone knew about it. The players knew about it. The media knew about it. The fans knew. The only people who hadn't announced it was Everton themselves. So, but I didn't actually realise until I sort of dug into it a bit more when I was writing the book that Carragher had actually said it a year earlier. It was, I mean, he did mention it on Monday Night Football. He said, I said it before and the club came back at me over it, and fair enough, they fought the corner. And I went, when did he say that? And I went back and it was like April 2022. So that was like just before things started picking up under Lampard. So, but when I started writing the book, I didn't have a working title for it, which sounds a bit strange. So it was sort of a bit of a gift from the gods that it came up then, because at the time I didn't think, oh, that's a good title. At the time I thought, that's the damning statement. And then a couple of days, weeks went past, and I went, you know what, that's a really good title. Pitched it to the publishers, and they went, yeah, like that. So, but I can't take full credit for that one. I think that's for the brilliant man, Mr. Carragher, unfortunately.
The brain of Bootle, as he gets called.
Exactly.
But no, it is a great title, and it tells you exactly what the book's about. Now I remember speaking to you about when you were writing this a few years ago. So how long's this? How long's it took in total?
It's a bit of a long story. So I had the idea of doing a book on Everton in about 2019, and I sort of thought, try and make it a positive news story about Bramley-Moore Dock. I went into the club and said to them, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you think there's any sort of support, resources you can offer up? And I don't think they were really convinced about it, because obviously the ground, they hadn't even put a shovel in the ground at the time. Planning permission hadn't been approved. I think they were a little bit like, we've been here before, this could all fall flat in our face.
Yeah.
They were helpful, don't get me wrong, but I came away from that thinking, well, if they don't think there's an angle here, then maybe there isn't an angle. I'll leave it. Forgot about it. Didn't sort of have any plans to write a book for about a few months. And then about the November of that year, Liverpool and Man City were going neck and neck, and I ended up writing the book on the rivalry with them. But to be honest, that put me off a little bit of doing another one, because I signed the contract in December. I was meant to have it handed over by May. So I was trying to condense 60 years into 5 months, effectively. So I was working on it night and day. And then we had a lockdown, so, everyone's at home. But, my work commitments didn't stop. I was starting to write, editorial pieces for papers overseas. I was starting to cover games behind closed doors locally. And obviously, spend time with my family, because, my son was only quite young then. So he was, stuck at home rather than going to a nursery. So sort of having to juggle all that was a bit of a balancing act. And also, any other year, I reckon that book probably sells quite well. But to come out in the summer that Liverpool win the league for the first time in 30 years, it just got swamped by every book about Liverpool winning the league. So I just thought, I'm not going to get any good returns on it. Not that you get any good returns anyway, by the way. Publishers, because they take a lot of the risk with proofing and legality, production, they take the vast majority of your revenue share, which is fine. It's part of the business. But because it was such a low turnout, the feedback I got was good. I thought, I'm not going to do another one. And then I sort of joked with my missus about, I'm going to do one about Everton. She's like, don't you dare. And I thought, I'm not going to do one. I swore blind I wasn't going to do one. And then we got to December 2021. So this was 18 months after my last one came out. And Everton was sliding into chaos. Benitez was the manager. The club was heading towards relegation. Twitter Spaces was a thing at the time, wasn't it? With, Evertonians hosting spaces practically around the clock. There was ones at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. You had View from the Bones doing it. You had independent fans doing it. And it was almost like therapy for a lot of fans. And then on top of that, you had the 27 campaign kicking into life and, holding the charlatans at board level to account. So I thought, maybe there is something there. So I started working on it, pitched to a publisher, and they said, yeah, like the idea of it. It needs to be quite sort of, they call it colour. So when you go to do a match, you don't just write a match report, you write in-depth analysis, and you set the scene and stuff like that. They wanted something like that, and I said, okay, yeah. And by that point, it was, I hate to say it was calm because it wasn't calm, but it was calmer than what came afterwards. But I said it in the explainer piece I did for the launch, that we had a few nervy moments at the end of that season and the season after, because it looked like Everton might have been going down, which would have then meant the timeline gets sped up. But then we went the other way with it. So because of the 777 takeover and everything else, we had 7 launch dates and 2 official launches. And the second official launch was only because the demand was so high that it had to be pushed back till this week now. But it's quite fit we're talking about it today, because today is exactly 9 years since Moshiri's buyout was confirmed. It's 9 years since he became majority share. Yeah, 27th of February 2016. So it feels almost quite fitting. But yeah, it's been about, from start to finish, it was probably December 21 to December 24, so 3 years in full. And thankfully, it was done and dusted on the day the takeover was ratified. So I was glad to see the back of it, really.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah. There is a link below in the description of this video, so please click on it and get yourself hold of the book. But can I ask, Rich, was there any pushback from the club at all? Or?
There hasn't been any yet, but I don't think they've seen the content, really. They've been aware that it's been coming out for the best part of a year. I think everyone knows it's been coming out since, I think I went public with it in March last year. So they've known what's coming, and they've probably got a rough idea of what the content are going to entail, given how the past 8 years went. How that is conveyed to me, I don't know. I'm going to have to just wait and see. But what I would say to them, if they are watching this, because we know they do watch stuff to the club, they do monitor fan channels, fan media, fan tweets even. You know, I know people who've had that happen to them. It's happened to me as well. I'd say this is basically drawing a line on the things. You know, what's happened in the past is in the past, but it's important to put it down, because there's going to be a lot of revisionism around not just Moshiri, but around managers, around former directors, and around how they weren't as bad as they were, or how they were actually better than people gave them credit. And I think Moshiri will get a lot of credit for the stadium, even though he didn't really fund it. I think I said to somebody on Blue Sky the other week, because he said, "Are you going to sell it outside the ground that Moshiri built?" I said, that's like saying to somebody who ordered the lobster thermidor, well done for ordering it, but making everyone else foot the bill for it, because that's what he did effectively. But no, I don't know what's going to come of it, but I would just put that point on record that this is drawing a line and making sure everything's out there. And, you know, it's because once you publish a book, Paul, the book's frozen in time, isn't it? You know, you can't, unless you do like rewrites or reprints, you can't really change it. So what's out there now it's all factual, it's all been legally checked, it's all, you know, it's been done to the letter of the law, basically. So because of that, I'm hoping it's going to be treated quite fairly, because it was quite difficult, because I think some people are expecting me to have 2 foot to the club at every opportunity, and some people on this sort of more pro club side of things, supporter-wise, will think you should have embellished a lot more, you should have been more fair to the club. So trying to find a balance where I'm fair to them, but I'm also calling out the stuff that went on, which was morally reprehensible, was difficult. But you've got to be objective in these things. You know, if you start going in with agendas, you're going to make a mess of things, and you're not going to get an accurate picture, which is what I wanted to build up, really.
No, completely, yeah. And obviously, you know, he did do a lot with the stadium and stuff, and we can't say he didn't spend his money, because he did, but for everything like that, I always look back and go, you know, apparently it was him who wanted Mr. Benitez to come into Everton, and, you know, by all accounts, even Ken Knight was like, that's not a good idea, and I think everyone could see that was a bad idea, apart from Farhad Moshiri. And one thing that used to annoy me was, like, Everton had their old media team, and Farhad would just phone up Jim White and go on Talk Sport and just give them exclusives, and it was just weird, wasn't it?
It was bizarre, and, you know, no one on this patch, whether they were, you know, people who've been doing it for as long as Andy Hunter, Paul Joyce, Chris Bascom, you know, people who I've got a tremendous amount of respect for, they couldn't get near Moshiri. You know, for people like me who've been doing it for 15 years plus, we had no chance, because all that would happen was Moshiri would ring up Talk Sport, or he'd send them Jim White an iPhone note. Remember them tweets where it was, here's a message from Farhad Moshiri that had been typed up on my iPhone, and it's like, it was bizarre. And then, I mean, there was a point made by somebody who contributed to the book. I won't embarrass them now, because I think people should read it. It's a really good point that about the club's got so many incredible platforms. They've got things like the YouTube, the website. They've got the fans forum. There's ways that Moshiri can convey stuff to the fan base, but he kept going to TalkSport, who, let's be honest, doesn't have a great track record. But also, I think it's a bit hypocritical, because, I mean, I don't really listen to TalkSport religiously. I probably listen to it on the way back from games and stuff like that. But I've heard the old clip where Sam and Jordan's going all in on Mashiri and saying, basically the foreign guy's a bad guy and the English guy's a good guy in the situation. Yeah. So no bad words about Bill Kenwright. And then Mashiri spilling his guts to Jim White, and I was going, there's something wrong with this picture here. I don't think far out from what people have told me who've had dealings with him face to face or via Zoom. He doesn't strike me as the sharpest knife in the drawer, but then again, the guy is a multi-billionaire. And bizarrely, his net worth increased while he was Everton owner, which I find insane. You preside over back-to-back point deductions, you preside over eye-watering losses, a way to revenue turnover of 92% at the last set of accounts last year. How is he a multi-billionaire? And I can only assume that it's because everyone else footed the bill for him in some way or other. I think he was very sort of, okay, yeah, he did front load a lot of the signings in 2016, 2017, but he wasn't really sort of, it's not like, I don't know, Abramovich maybe is probably an extreme example, or, Clear Lake now. He's not like them where he was just throwing money at things. I think that came to a point where he was sort of dialing it back slowly but surely, and then come 2021 when Ancelotti left, then everything came home to roost with FFP. But yeah, I just found the Jim White thing so bizarre. And the weirdest thing was, Mashiri didn't put anything on record when Carlo Ancelotti was appointed on the club website. Didn't do an interview with the club website, Everton TV, nothing. Within minutes of them announcing that appointment, he's on TalkSport on air with Jim White in a lounge in Goodison. And it marks that situation in Newcastle a few years ago where he had certain media companies or outlets that had basically paid to become trusted official media partners, and they were getting better access than others. Obviously the specifics of that I'm not 100% on, so that's not gospel, but that's a rough idea, and it felt a bit like that with Mashiri. But obviously it was a relationship traded on friendship rather than finances. It's just bizarre. But again, in what situation do you have a football club's name getting dragged through the mud, either by the owner or by his confidants on the national airwaves? And that isn't just Jim White, by the way. That was Keir Jarabson, because what we remember is interview going on shouting the odds about Everton and what he'd done and who he'd pushed to the club. So it wasn't normal, and I think I hope that never happens again when it comes to Everton.
It seemed like Keir certainly had Mashiri's ear as well, didn't he? I remember reading about he wanted them to sign Balotelli as well after we signed Moise Kean, which would have been another expensive disaster. But and do you know what it says to me is, do you remember when Mashiri was at Arsenal and he released a statement once after they lost the FA Cup final saying if I had more of a stake, I'd be doing this, I'd be doing that. I can kind of see why Arsenal were like, no, don't give this guy too much power.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, when you look at it, you think when he came in at Everton and started throwing money around, you thought Arsenal missed the trick here. But then you look at it now, maybe they would get run something. Maybe the Cronkies would. I'm not saying that they are the best owners for Arsenal, because I don't know much about Arsenal's hierarchical setup. But I know there was back in 2011, 2012, a lot of there was like a civil war between the fans over which side they backed. Did he back Usmanov or did he back the Cronkies? Okay, they're not going to win the title again this season, but you've got to say the progress they've made. It looks like they were right to keep Mashiri and Usmanov at arm's length, because you've seen what one person in that dynamic has done to the club. We can speculate about Usmanov all we want. We don't know definitively what he's done or what he's influenced. We only know bits here and there, but you see what the damage Mashiri's done, and it's mind-blowing, really. I do struggle for the word sometimes for how bad it's been, because it could have easily been Arsenal who could have fallen, out of favour and been on this sort of downward trajectory. Maybe not relegation battle territory, but we've seen with Man United how easy it can happen. So maybe they had the right idea. I just think at the time we all thought, and I was guilty of myself, I thought they missed a trick here. But turns out in hindsight, they were actually on the right side of history, really.
No, yeah, I mean, it's mad to think he's an accountant as well, What I can do.
I don't know any accountants who would literally not have a handle on their own club finances and then put another accountant in charge, because obviously they can't be cooking their own books or anything like that. But I mean, we had we went in and saw Grant Ingle before one of the, I forget which set of accounts came out, and I wasn't convinced with the stuff he was putting forward at the time. I mean, they gave us this line about how these add backs, they call them, which are like deductible write-offs, so stuff like your Everton in the community stuff that the club pays out of its own resources for, stuff that they pay for the academy infrastructure, the women's team, the stadium. And as it turned out, none of that counted really. And, Everton ended up with a point deduction on the back of that. And then again for a second breach. So I do question a lot of Mercedes choices. And I do question the accountant's shout because, I mean, someone made the point in the book, and again, I won't mention who it was, but they said there's no stupid billionaires. So whether they've earned it through their own commercial dealings or they've convinced someone to give them that money, they've had to use some smarts. And I just think, I don't know what happened with Mercedes. It just seemed like he went the other way. He was a smart man. He had a clear vision. We all remember the AGM in 2017 where he spoke so passionately about we don't want to be a museum, we want to be in break into the top 6. And then things just went downhill. And I don't know how much of that you can attribute to it just being thrown good money after the bad, because we know that happened. But Mercier became more olive as time went on. And I don't know if he just lost his way or if he was always like that. But it's bizarre that a man with his background in finance and his net wealth and everything else that he's been involved with things like Megaphone and all the firms that Usmanov had founded or bought into, how he could be so naive and so blinkered in some of his operations.
I always thought that was background when it said like he's an Iranian businessman with ties to Russian steel. I always just thought that just sounds like a Bond villain now. You know what I mean? It's just okay, yeah. He's just missing that little cat on his lap. But it's when you were doing sort of like research for the book and like sort of digging into things, is there anything that astonished you? Like anything that really surprised you?
Not massively, because a lot of the stuff. I mean, I'm lucky that I was basically present for the entire period. So from 2016 to 2024, I was covering Everton and still am covering Everton. It was the stuff historically that was quite interesting because I think you'll be able to read more about it in the book, but this thing about when Everton fans were planning to mobilise against the owners or they were going to do coach welcomes, you get these staunch pro-club loyalists who call it cop-out behaviour. Don't do that, it's cop-out behaviour, which I always found a bit of a bizarre term because, I mean, if you're looking at cop-out behaviour now, the top of the league and probably going to win at least one other trophy, if not 2. Yeah. So I think that argument doesn't really hold for me. And you also saw what happened outside Goodison before the derby. If that's cop-out behaviour, then so be it, because that was incredible. I was in amongst the fans on Goodison Road covering that, and it was incredible. But on the protest side of things, Liverpool didn't really protest until about 2007. There was sort of 2 protests. Well, one protested that year and then a lot more the year after because they had some issues with the allocation for the Champions League final that year. And then there was obviously the Hickson issues. But before that, Everton had been protesting quite consistently. And I think that unfortunately says more about how Everton's been run over a number of decades, because Liverpool fans never felt the need to protest. They always felt things are running fine. Whereas Everton fans have had reasonable and legitimate gripes to complain, whether it was under Ken Wright, Peter Johnson, even Philip Carter back in the 80s, those infamous flyers calling for Carter and Kendall to be removed. Even going back to the 60s, there's a lot there. So it was interesting looking into that. But also, I think a lot of things sort of came after. I think there was something that, Paul Gregg had a book come out last year and he was doing the rounds talking about why things fail with King's Dock. And that surprised me a little bit when he said about, I actually had the council try and broker a deal for a sort of revenue share to sort of keep the bid alive once Everton's funding had failed. And Ken Wright just vetoed it, which it shouldn't be surprising, but I didn't know that was the sort of thing that happened. But in terms of stuff that surprised me, most of it was on the job. Stuff like Headlock Gate. There's been a few moments where I've been, in the ground where stuff has surprised me, like stuff that's happened, whether it's been fans or things you hear or things you see. And that's probably the biggest thing that comes out of it, because it's about the 8 years, but it's also it delves into the history, because Moshiri doesn't become Everton's de facto owner if Everton's a well-run club or if Everton doesn't have the financial resources to do it. You saw it with Man City with Abu Dhabi. You saw it with Chelsea with Abramovich. You even saw it with the Glazers at Man United, because the Edwards family couldn't really sort of maintain the success they'd had. So people don't come into a club unless a club's well run. So I think that's what sort of it was important to drill down into. But as I say, the protesting thing and the cop-out behaviour shout was probably the biggest thing outside of what I actually saw and covered on the job.
What was the most enjoyable aspect about writing this book, Richard?
Enjoyable. That's a tough word, isn't it? I don't think there was any enjoyment really. There was a lot of interviewing, there was a lot of research, there was a lot of writing, and I was juggling, work commitments, family life, and everything else. So, but I think the most enjoyable chapter, it'd probably be, I'd have to go for the chapter rather than part of the process. I'd say probably the Carlo Ancelotti period, because that felt like a bit of a fever dream, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do laugh when people go on about Moyes being back and how well he's done, and people and I made the point of it could have happened sooner.
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
are like, well, it's just about, you got Ancelotti. I mean, what more can you want? Well, if everyone had known, fans and media, what Ancelotti would do to the club in terms of walking away at the last minute at the end of the season after 18 months, and you look at where West Ham have gone, winning a Conference League, first European trophy ever.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got to correct myself on that. First European trophy in 60 years, because they did win the Cup Winners' Cup. I will be remiss to say that. First, major trophy for 40 years at least. You just think that could have been Everton. That could have been. There wouldn't be any 30-year banners in the Bullens Road at the last derby. There won't be 30-year banners and balloons at Anfield in a few weeks' time. Everton could have been in a better place. And I do remember we used to do the grand old team reaction, didn't we, after the games under Silva and under Ancelotti, and we did say, well, I said Moyes was in the frame then before Ancelotti became an option. I said that's not a bad option, but that's because the alternative was Mark Hughes. So I mean that puts it into context. But I do wonder now what would have happened. But I don't want to start sounding like Michele, because that's what he said when he signed off. But yeah, the Ancelotti period was quite enjoyable, just because it was nice, even though it was locked down and there was only a select few of us getting to games, and there was some unpleasant bits in it. Obviously, the derby fallout wasn't nice. But the way things where you actually felt like you were getting Everton back as a club. Spirit of the Blues was riding the chart on iTunes and knocking Miley Cyrus off top spot and stuff like that. And it just felt like the club was going back to how it should have been all those years ago. When before the money dried up under Johnson, before Ken couldn't afford to pay the mortgages, and was borrowing, from every lender, good or bad or evil. So that was probably that period, but it wasn't a great period, but it was quite enjoyable in terms of covering everything. I mean, the Tottenham game sticks out for me, where Ancelotti turns on his ears with a cup of tea, like a Mafia Don, and on the touchline as everyone around them's losing their heads.
Calm down, man. Duncan's jumping up and down.
Yeah, and he just turns on his ears and blows onto his tea. It was a cold night that night, by the way. It was about -1, -2, because I was in the ground, and I did think I'm going to catch hypothermia here. It was that bad, but that period is probably the most enjoyable of the full chapters. Apart from that, probably the run-in under Lampard was quite nice, because again you saw Evertonians enjoying going the match again, because Benitez, I know it wasn't entirely his fault and he was hamstrung by the finances. He didn't help things. So when Lampard came in and got the fans on side and bought into it, and the fans were doing the coach welcomes and they were really getting behind the team, that was probably the second most enjoyable part of it. But as I say, that was only a fraction of one of the chapters, so it's hard to really sort of say that entire chapter was enjoyable, because the first half was pretty horrible, to be honest.
I'd imagine the least enjoyable part is the fact checking side of it and the legal side of it, because that can be quite grueling, can't it?
Not really, because you've got to show you're working in these situations, and you've got to evidence things. And anyone who's sort of done higher education knows you've got, when you do like theses or dissertations, you've got to show you're working. So I had no problem with that, and I obviously had all the evidence to hand. But the problem is you go through. It's not frustrating, but you go through two processes. You go through an editorial process where an independent editor will check everything. They'll check every grammatical thing. They'll check everything. And if something looks a little bit ropey, they'll add a note saying, not sure on this. And there was a couple of them in the first draft. But also, we had to go through two independent editors, because the book that was signed off originally, that had, I think it was 4-5 launch dates, but non-released, only covered up until the 777 takeover announcements, and we sort of filled in sort of the point deduction and stuff sort of retrospectively earlier in that chapter. But then when we knew they weren't going to take over, the plan was, right, we need to do something a bit different now. We need to have a new final chapter that covers all of this. So that was probably the hardest part, because then even though I was working across a shorter time frame, I was conscious that at any given moment, once some new owners come in, it could be August, could be September, this is going to be ready to go, because it has to be. So I was against the clock there, and I thought, I'm going to make more mistakes in this than I thought. Fortunately, I didn't, and the legal things were quite straightforward. It was only like little amendments here, and I think there was one phrase I said, and the only thing that they could say was, what do you mean by this? Because we don't understand what the context is. So I just explained what it was, and they were like, yeah, that's fine. But everything got checked, double checked and triple checked, because, you know, you're dealing with people like Usmanov, Philip Green, you know, Mishiri, even the club itself. You've got to be very mindful that one wrong word and they will come down like a ton of bricks. So I did check everything, and I did, you know, double. You know, I was very meticulous about it. I even spoke to people who had reported on stuff in the past and said, "Did you have any comeback from it?" And their answer was no, nothing. So that gave me the green light to sort of put that to the legals, and they went, "Yeah, that's fine." The funniest one was that the first editor who looked over it and did an incredible job, I must say. I've got to give them absolute credit. They did raise the fact that what can we really include the fact that Everton fans held banners calling the board liars? And I went, well, I mean, it's an opinion for a start. It's a fan's opinion. Yeah, they're not saying this is fact they're liars. They're saying we're calling them liars. And the legal people went, yeah, that's fine. They're just reporting the facts. So no, there was never really any pushback really, because there didn't need to be any pushback. You know, we're all working on the same sort of deadlines, and we're all working in the same direction. So anything that was sort of flagged as maybe tone that down, maybe change this to say this, I took it on board, and, you know, I didn't have any problem with it. But it was a weird experience, because the last one didn't have any. We didn't need to do any legal check because everything was in the public domain. The interviews were obviously exclusively sourced, so, you know, they were genuine as well. So because we're chronicling 60 years of history, it wasn't a problem. Going into something like this with all the various complexities to it meant you had to be a bit more meticulous. Not that the last book had any sort of problems, really. It's just there was no need for it to be sent to legals, really. So, yeah, I think that's the long answer, really. But you're getting a lot of these today, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. But yeah, the book is available on the link below. Please click on it. The worst run club in the country. Couldn't get my words out then. But it's definitely a worthwhile read for every Evertonian. Probably Jordan Everton's most turbulent times in recent years, isn't it?
Yeah, I think probably the closest you've come to that before was probably the sort of, I mean, probably the pre-Mashiri area. Bill Kenwright sort of had a lot of protests directed against him. Obviously, you had Keogh, who did a brilliant job in stopping the Kirby development, or at least trying to help stop the Kirby development. And, you know, and now reaping the rewards of that incredible stadium on the banks of the Mersey. So I think that was probably the most turbulent period. But I mean, the Peter Johnson years weren't the best, really. Let's be honest. There was a lot of activism there, and some stuff actually was quite interesting that I hadn't actually realised. So it's quite publicly known, actually. There was a blockade when Everton was trying to move to Kirby under Johnson the first time. You know, they had this hamper dome, they called it, and it was going to be on the Kirby golf course. I didn't realise that a delegation had been sent with Everton and the two councils, Nosey and Liverpool, to go and check out the site and see if it was viable. They took a coach load in, and all the golfers blocked the entrance. So indirectly, they were doing the Evertonians' work for them, which is brilliant, because, you know, had they just been given a clear run through, you know, Everton might have been, and, you know, nothing against Kirby, you know, it's a nice part of the world. You know, I'm there quite regularly with Liverpool a lot as well. Got family there as well. So I'm not going to sit here and slam it, but let's be honest, Everton Football Club moving out of the city of Liverpool's boundaries probably would have been quite disastrous, really. So that was quite surprising. But yeah, the Johnson period and the Kenwright period, but although the Kenwright period was quite intermittent, you know, again, cop-out behaviour shouts sort of was sort of doing the fans who were trying to make a change and have made the change since then. They were giving them down and trying to deter a lot of people from joining them. But the worse things got on the Mashiri, the more fans mobilised and the more they I mean, you look at that Arsenal March before Sean Dyche's first game, and you see the BT camera above Goodison, thousands there. That would never have happened 20 years ago. Would never have happened in the 90s. you know, you had a couple of hundred for the Blue Union marches. So it shows the power of not just social media, but also Evertonian fury. When things are going wrong, they step up, whether it's a relegation battle, whether it's board members disgracing the club through their actions and their words, they step up because they can't rely on others to do it. And that's the thing, isn't it? You know, Evertonians will always do what's best for their club, whether the people above agree with it or not, whether the people in the dugout agree with it or not, they will always do what's best for the club. And that's the thing that comes away from this for me.
Yeah, no, well said that, Rich, well said. But yeah, the book is available on the link below. Please click on it and check it out. And yeah, Rich, thanks very much for that. And me and Dave, the last couple of home games, we sort of go to the park end afterwards just to... Dave's brother and his dad are stewards, so we go and say hello to them. But if you're at the West Ham game, we'll come around and we'll have a chat about the Blues, like old times, sakes.
Yeah, well, I saw Dave at the fan zone. I think it was either the United game or one of the ones before. But if I'm there, which I'm hoping I am going to be, we'll definitely catch up again because we used to do the reaction, didn't we, after the early dice games last seasons. But I think after me and Mikey we're getting rained on it after Arthur and things were looking pretty grim with 777. We tailed off a bit, didn't we? Because I think no one had the stomach for it, really. I know I didn't. And I think Mikey was sort of expecting the death of Everton, to be honest. He did say to me, what are you going to do with your weekend when Everton's no longer in them? And I went, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you know, the club could go under. I'm like, I hadn't really thought about it that way, really. But it shows, you know, how bad things got that people were going to that extreme. Thank God it didn't. But yeah, definitely, we definitely need to catch up, mate.
Yeah, to be fair, half the time it was like, it's too cold, you know, it's too cold. Let's do it in the car or let's do it in the Falcon, you know what I mean? But let's say, yeah, but yeah, please don't forget the link for Rich's new book, The Worst Run Club in the Country, is below. So please check it out. And once again, thanks for coming on, Rich.
No worries, mate. That's always be on with you.
Good stuff. Right, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Up the fucking toffees, Colin Chong.